so we thought that it was important to maybe provide a short sentence about what we felt about constructivism, or how we could define it. And we came up with the idea of that constructivism is the theory to explain how knowledge is constructed based on existing individual knowledge. There are a number of theories that have emerged. I focus specifically on who the early thinkers and what the early texts were around this. Now, they're not the key, so let's be clear that there are a number of authors out there, but we picked out Dewey, who believes that education must be engaged with to expand and develop the experience. Maria Montessori, although she did talk about andragogical learning more, she did touch upon pedagogical learning, and she said that education is not what teachers give, it's the natural processes that are concerned with the human going out to experience the knowledge effectively. And then Kolb, finally, he decided that concrete experience as part of the learning process. So it's the individual tests their knowledge out in the real world. So you have the knowledge and you go out and you test it. And it may be that there's no right or wrong, and it's not about finding a right or wrong. It's about demonstrating and learning and failing and then going back and reconstructing that knowledge. So it is heavily linked to the idea of constructionism, although we haven't really gotten into that realm, have we? No, okay. Briefly then, and some of my colleagues will speak about this, we talked about about constructivism in education and constructivism for teachers, but constructivism for learners and how that differs. I think that was the second bit, wasn't it? Sorry. Yeah, is that okay?
I'm very deliverable focused, so I looked at constructivism for learners. In higher education, we deal with large class sizes, and it's the complete opposite from constructivism. And we stand at the front of the room, or I do e-learning, so I stand in front of my computer, or sit in front of my computer with a cup of coffee and my gym jam sometimes. And you present to people, and when you present to people in a non-constructivist style, they take in 5% of the knowledge, which is nothing, is it? It's terrible. And the difficulty we've got in relation to these large class sizes is how do we get them to interact? As we just discussed, how do we get them to interact? So what I looked at is using information technology and other medias to get the students to interact, following the lectures, and even during the lectures, although I had a bit of a disaster trying to do it during the lecture the other day. And the way it can be done, the way you can get people to communicate, to learn in a constructivist style, is through interaction in information technology like wikis, blogs, discussion boards, and the likes. And once you get them into these new ways of following up their learning, they can take on more like 40% of the knowledge. If you can get them to actually to present the information to as if they're teaching, and they can go up to 80% of the knowledge gets encapsulated within them. So that's where I came from.
We also looked at constructivism for teachers, and it links obviously very, very closely to constructivism for learners, and thinking about what teachers then need to do in order to produce the types of materials or the types of thinking that the students are going to have to engage with. Do you want to say more?
Yeah, sure. Well, these 5 things are based on an article which me and Paul read, which is about constructivism in mass higher education. And the author identified 5 key things from the literature. So to create an environment for active learning, you need to have authentic assessment, student responsibility, generative learning strategies, authentic learning context, and cooperative support. So, for example, with student responsibility, the students have to be responsible for their own learning to some degree. And, for example, with cooperative support, collaboration between students should also be encouraged.
My roles are sort of trying to come up with a bit of a structure as well, including like looking at different kind of the strands that we'd look at. So kind of like an introduction, looking at education, which kind of came into 2 strands, the kind of people and history, instruction strategies, and the sort of confusion between things as well. So it's kind of looking at more of a kind of overview perspective, but Just on a side note about the medium as well, we found it a bit kind of almost restrictive for doing what we're trying to do with it. So I don't know, sort of just like side point. So we come up with that sort of idea of coming up with, you know, 2 strands from education, for example. So yeah, that's my bit really.
Okay.